It usually just lives right up here. Thank you. Okay, so we have the recording started. We have a quorum, which is so exciting. So I want to go ahead and take a look and approve the minutes of the last 3 meetings. Really nice to see you in person. Welcome. So if I could have a motion, if anyone feels so inclined, we have minutes from February, March, and April to approve.
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jeffrey. Does anyone have questions, comments, corrections? None?
None.
All right. Then all in favor of approving those 3 minutes, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Excellent. Yeah, great. So this is fantastic. I'm just looking at everybody who's here. Trisha logged in as well. We have everyone but Wayne, so that is fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for making the time today. So we have a presentation on the agenda for today, so I'm going to kind of quickly go through just an update on what I've been working on this month. Just the normal things. The guidebook, the Washington guidebook, is ready to be printed. It is. I'm not sure. WBA is working with the printers to just get the billing in place, so that should happen any day now. We were hoping to have those in time for Memorial Day. I don't know if that's still likely. Fran, do you have an update on that?
Not from last week, no.
Okay, so I will follow up on that. I think it is just with the WBA treasurer who needs to put together the invoices to get that off to the printer.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about Memorial Day. Yeah, we'll ask Angel to prepare invoices.
Okay, so that should be heading to the printer any day now. The newsletter deadline was yesterday. I think we had a remarkable turnout of 16 to 18 articles. So we're going to have to really look at our space. So that was fantastic. It is in the proofing and layout portion and should hopefully be ready to go in the mailboxes by the first weekend in June. So that is in the works. The Welcome Center, as I think I've reported last, the water fountain is in, it is not installed yet though. The plumber is yet to install that, but the carpenter did come to remove the paneling, so that is in progress. And I think the other thing I'd like to report is that the money for everything, I believe, has been earmarked at this point. So that is exciting. The money to do the painting and the bathroom upgrades is all in the capital budget that is to be approved as part of the regular budget on Thursday. And for the design work on the inside that the library, the museum, Stephen Barkus and Sandor Max are going to do, I was able to find some money in this year's EDC budget for the design, and then money in the capital budget signs that we set aside last year to do the actual work. So I think we should be all good there, and I will just keep you posted on progress. A lot of that work will not start until July though, because it is in the budget for the next fiscal year. New homeowner mailings, I'm still doing those. I believe there were only 3 for April, so things have slowed down, and I'm sure Julie will be able to comment more on the housing market when we get to that. Community Center, the Community Center Programming Committee, I just wanted to let you all know that we will be having a meeting on Thursday before the town budget vote. We had, I think it was sometime in the winter, Jim put out a call for people to sign up for various committees for the community center. And we got a lot of people responding to that, signing up for various committees, landscaping, our building design, etc. And the programming committee is going to have its first meeting this week to just start, well, really bringing people up to speed. It was really Dan and Tony that got that started. We did a visit to Woodbury, and I believe they did a couple other visits. to other senior/community centers. And then COVID came and we haven't done any visits since then. But Jay Stewart is really taking the lead on that committee and has had a really fabulous meeting over at the Litchfield Community Center. So we're going to get that up and running. Does anyone have questions about that or any of the other?
Michelle, we added the garden club to our group that want to participate fun.
Okay, that's great. They want to participate in.
They wanted to help with the outdoor.
Okay, like the landscaping and such. Did I just mute Jim? Sorry. There was some background noise. I was trying to mute somebody. Hey, Jim, can you unmute yourself? There. Are you good? All right. So I'm going to write down garden club. All right, childcare. Thank you so much to the committee. We had great turnout for the Board of Selectmen meeting last Thursday, and David Varnish and myself presented the drawings and the estimates for the renovation of the space. Because of code and fire egress issues, we needed to put in some exterior doors, which raised the estimate higher than we had originally thought. So we are actually up around 500,000 for renovation, furniture, fixtures, furnishings, everything that we would need to get going. So the next step in the process is going to be a public hearing, and that is going to be scheduled for sometime in June, and I will keep you all posted. But at that hearing, we will be presenting the entire concept from beginning to end with the survey results and business plan, and try to answer any questions that people may have. So thank you to everyone who came to the Board of Selectmen meeting. That was really important. And it will be important that we all are there for the public hearing as well. Does anyone have questions?
That's Thursday, not Wednesday, right?
The budget is actually Thursday. Yes, that was my bad. I hit send a little too quick on that. The budget is this Thursday in 2 days. The public hearing about the daycare will be in June, and we'll set that date in the next day or two, and then I will make sure everybody knows what that day is. All right. Let's see. The summer postcard, I just wanted to let you know that went to the printer today. I have a few here on the table. We did one last year. It's got a list of the arts and culture events coming up for the summer. This was a really big hit. You know, people were really happy with this. We're going to mail it to every household in Washington, and then we print it. We are set to print 1,000 extra that we can have sitting at the coffee shops. Actually, at the WBA social last week, so we were talking about maybe we should even think of a few places outside of town to place this if we can. So that's something that we can talk about. I'll have those 1,000 here, and we can think about that at our next meeting. You know, places to distribute. A lot of work went into updating that because we're trying to get it out earlier this year. There were a lot of big events moved to June. The block party one, the Spring Hill Arts Gathering. So between Julia and myself and Ola over at Sandor Max, we contacted every organization, every nonprofit, every group that had been on the postcard before, and some that hadn't been, but we had seen some activity either on Instagram, trying to verify all these events. So a lot of work went into that, and hopefully people will hold on to it and attend all of these wonderful events. So hopefully, and we're also trying to make sure we get that mailed out before June. So that should be coming out in the next week or so. What else did I have? I think that was it for my update. The only other thing I want to talk about is under new business. So does anyone have questions about any of the topics that we shared? No. All right. No old business that I'm aware of. Does anyone have old business that they'd like to address? Oh, okay. New business. The only thing I wanted to quick talk about was the block party, which is a joint event between Parks and Rec and the WBA. We had talked about having a table, an EDC table there, just like we did for the Harvest Fest, to sign up, to promote Explore, the website, and to gather email addresses for the selectmen's email and for the Explore monthly newsletter. So if anyone would like to help with that, I'm happy to be there to set the table up and do that. And also, I'm always looking for ideas. In the last few, we've done a raffle. If you give us your email, you are entered into a raffle to win something, whether it's one of the Washington bags or one of the Washington travel mugs. So we could do that again. Just freshen up the displays, or we could try to think of something new. So
That's it.
3rd, it's the first Friday,
June or July,
June.
or the Friday.
Yeah, first Friday.
Oh.
For those who aren't aware,
I'm on the wrong year,
the
so.
2022.
Yep.
So if for those who aren't aware, the block party was hugely successful last year. I think it was just a first event post-COVID shutdown or the second or third shutdown. And so there's a band out in front of town hall, and the businesses are open, and activities for the kids, food, just everyone sort of comes out for that evening. And Judy Black is doing a movie that night, so it should just be a full evening, weather permitting. So it's a wonderful opportunity to get ourselves out there, promote the newsletter and all of the other communications that we do.
I'll help you with that.
Great, thank you. That is
Now I know what year it is.
yeah, that's great. And just so people, I don't know, I believe, well, definitely Trisha found us through the Harvest Festival.
That's
That
right.
was, yeah, which was wonderful.
I'm
And
happy to help with that too.
great, thank you. That's great. And I feel like I spoke with Kristen maybe one of the first times at one of those tables. So it's a great outreach to introduce ourselves as a committee and to get the community connected
Mhm.
to what's going on.
Is there a rain date or?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think we talked about this last year because we were on pins and needles. There was a storm supposedly coming in that day, but it's really hard for the businesses to schedule staff for a Saturday or
Right.
some other time. So I don't believe there's a rain date. Am I correct, Fran?
Right, I mean, no, it was a big discussion, and hopefully we don't have the on pins and needles this year waiting to see what happens.
We lucked out last year.
We
We
did, it
almost-
turned out, it was a beautiful evening as well as.
It was, but the skies were dark at noon, and we almost called it, but decided to just soldier on. So it was a good call. All right, well, thank you to Kristen and Trisha for helping, and we'll think of some ideas of we can do the things we've already done in the past, and if anyone has some great ideas, you can just send them to me in email, and we'll move forward with that. All right, I'm going to move on and introduce Julie King. Most of you will know Julie, but for those of you who are relatively new, Julie has helped us. We have a committee, sort of an ad hoc subcommittee called Now that has met on and off through the years. The last iteration of this was Michael Jackson, Dan, Cher, myself, and Julie, looking at the housing and what we could possibly do to attract young families, because that was a mission. It is a mission still. It's stated in the POCD, of trying to diversify the age of people moving here and attracting young families to our community. And housing was an issue. And Julie did a fantastic presentation. If you have not seen it, it's posted on our website, on the EDC webpage. It has all of the background to what we're about to talk about today. And that was done in the winter, I think it was December of 2019, 3 months before COVID. And so, yeah, so the housing market has changed since then. So Julie is here to give us a little bit of an update on where we are. Okay.
So is it easier for me to come over there, Michelle?
Let me open this, whichever is, I'm not sure.
Probably makes more sense. So I can-
Maybe, so you can see, you can tell me when to advance. You should be, everybody should be able to see. I'm gonna share my screen. All right. What I should do though is put it in yours presentation.
Can I see more clearly?
I know, right? Right, isn't there like a presentation?
What?
What program?
Slideshow,
Isn't there a-
PowerPoint, I had to download
From
it.
beginning.
Clear on this.
That was clear, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That should get it.
Okay, so that's what everybody at home is seeing.
Okay.
All right.
So, good afternoon, everybody. Just for a little bit of background, my name is Julie King. Back when I started working on Washington Now with Michelle and Michael and the committee, a lot of my focus was coming at it from the perspective of a real estate agent. About halfway through COVID, I actually changed roles. I'm now actually managing all of Litchfield County for our team here at Sotheby's. So I have a broader perspective on what's happening throughout the county, as well as specifically here in Washington. And Michelle asked me just to give you an update on what's happening in real estate. To some degree, I want to dispel some of the rumors and focus on the facts. And then also just talk about the impact as it relates to where we left off with Washington Now. So before I get into that, I just want to make a statement. When we looked at this project back prior to COVID, one of the real key findings or points that we focused on was we have opportunity to bring young families here, but our biggest challenge is lack of inventory that's suitable for young families. And there was one sort of kind of perception that we needed to create that housing. Part of what I did was actually take a step back and say, that doesn't actually appear to be the issue. What the issue appears is that our town is so lovely and so wonderful that we have a situation in which many of the families that originally came here and raised their families here are still holding on to their houses. So we have sort of a disproportionate amount of our inventory kind of locked up by what we refer to as empty nesters. So people who have raised their children here, but their children have since moved on, and they're holding on to the inventory, which limits our ability to bring new people in. So an example of one of the examples of that was Revere Road. We sort of showed that as an example where you have 16 properties that were built in the 80s. They were very attractive to families. You had many students and young families on that road. As those students have graduated, many of the owners of those homes have stayed in place. So about 8 of the homes have turned over to new families and 8 of them have not. So that was just one example of this sort of dichotomy that we have here. So all of that to some degree changed pretty significantly during the pandemic. And I'm going to take you through a little bit of what happened here in Washington. I'll make sure that you all have these slides because it is very data heavy. But as we go through the slides, I'll just point out to you what's happening now and what happened in the past. So first of all, just in terms of a headline on where we are today, despite what you hear, so despite higher prices.
I can't. Let me see if I can go back to gallery. You keep going.
As you've heard, I'm sure you've heard this, prices have gone up. Also, you've probably started reading that mortgage rates are going up, but despite higher prices and despite mortgage rates rising, demand continues to be incredibly strong. The sort of the analogy that we use is we continue to have more buyers than properties to show them. So we saw that spike occur during COVID, and some people seem to think it's waned. What I would tell you is if you polled real estate agents throughout Litchfield County, they'll tell you it actually hasn't significantly waned. What has waned is the attitude of the buyers. So when the buyers were coming here during COVID, it was very much hurry up, I just got to get into anything, I just need to buy right now and get out of the city. That sense of emotional urgency has dissipated, but it would be inaccurate in our opinion to say that the market has slowed down. So as I take you through this data, what I want to point out to you is if you look at the closed data, you'll see that it suggests the peak has passed. But what I'm going to say to you is the peak is being masked by a lack of inventory. Okay, we are at an historically low rate of inventory available for sale throughout Litchfield County, as well as obviously in towns like Washington. It's not uncommon for us now to do a search on the MLS for properties for sale in a town and see that there's only 8 units or 12 units available for sale. And the price differential on that can be anywhere from, let's say, $350 up to $9 million. So you may only have 8 properties for sale with that kind of disparity. So you don't have a lot of choice available for the people that want to get in here. And again, if you go back to where we were pre-COVID, when what we were talking about was inventory being held by empty nesters with no children, that's been exacerbated now because we had properties change hands, but now we're at this historic low of properties available. So there's a self-fulfilling prophecy right now. If you do try to bring families in, you've got no place for them to buy. So it again, to me, goes back to what we said even pre-pandemic, that unless you can create a scenario where empty nesters have a place to go within town, we're not hearing that they want to leave town, but unless they have a place to go to downsize with less maintenance, we can't free up the inventory. So that headline remains. I'm just going to now kind of take you through some more of the detail. So what I'm going to show you is very specific to Washington. I always caveat this by saying, keep in mind, when you look at a multi-year trend, we are a very small market. Okay, you know, we don't have thousands of housing units to transition over. So over this period of time, and I measured it starting from May of 2018 through May of 2022, we've only transacted 306 units. Okay, which actually is pretty high for Washington, but you have to keep that in mind that that's over a 4-year period. Okay, so the first couple of slides that I'm just showing you, these are just trends. Okay, so the market trend started in 2019. These are closed units. So you can see here in Washington, we hit our peak around that sort of 2021 period. So just keep in mind, even though the pandemic started in March of 2020, people couldn't get into houses in 5 days. We didn't actually see the impact on the market for about 30 to 60 days after that. And then we saw it go up, we hit a spike, and now you see that coming down. So again, I just want to mention that that decline is somewhat masked by lack of inventory. We don't even have the inventory to sell the people that want to get in here. Okay. On the next slide, you can see it more dramatically. This is the number of homes for sale in Washington. Okay, so you can really see what I'm talking about there. Okay, so again, self-fulfilling prophecy. We actually have people that want to get into our towns, but we don't have the inventory to show them. Okay, the next slide is just another sort of example of what happened prior to COVID. It was very common for us and everybody in Litchfield County. We were never surprised to see a property on the market for a year or more, sometimes a year, 2 years, 18 months. We saw it was very common because we were a second home market. And we also, if we had people trying to get into school, it followed kind of the spring market and then it dried up. Look what's happened to our days on market. Okay, and that again, it speaks to demand. We have significantly lower days on market. The other piece is, and you heard this during COVID, you probably heard about multiple bids, people coming in with multiple offers. Okay, we still see that if the property is priced correctly. Okay, if the property is overpriced, we won't see multiple bids. But if we have a seller who's willing to put it on the market at or slightly below market value, we continue to see multiple bids. And we also are seeing more aggressive bidding. So back when this first started, people were putting in multiple bids and maybe going, 1, 2, 5% over asking price. We're now seeing no holds barred, unbelievable things happen when we put a property on the market at a reasonable price. Okay, so again, it appears, and people will say, oh, the market has slowed down. What I'm telling you is it hasn't slowed down. The demand is still there. What's slowing us down is lack of inventory. Okay, if we were able to free up inventory, you'd see these numbers change. But right now, we don't have a lot of inventory. People aren't willing to give up their homes. Okay. So go into the next slide. Okay, so what I'm going to show you, I broke up into, I'm going to take a 4-year look, and I broke it up into 2 years prior to the pandemic, and then the 2 years since the pandemic hit. Okay, so I'm going to show you all 4 years, but when we, from a real estate standpoint, when we're looking at all the data, we're looking at pre-pandemic. We still consider ourselves in the pandemic, but it's really looking at what happened prior to all of this happening to what's happening now. So again, this is a bit of an eye chart, but we'll give this to you so you can see it. This is the units sold. And again, this is specific to Washington. So on the bottom right corner, you can see 306 units have moved since May of 2018. And you can see that the bulk of those units moved between May of 2020 and 2021. Okay, so that was a year into the pandemic was when we saw most of those units transact. Okay, so 120, 39%, almost 40% of the units moved in that one 12-month period right there. Okay, I also broke it out by price band for you because when you look at these charts more detailed, what you're going to see is a little bit of a shift, and it's going to become more apparent on the next slide. Okay, this is percent by price band. And what you're going to see is, do you see in the first 2 years, that kind of 28, 29, you see the higher percents shifted towards the lower end of the market? Okay, so sort of that 550 and above, you see some of the higher numbers. When we came into the pandemic, what happened was we had an influx of people coming in, but they were willing to spend more on the housing. Okay, so we saw this sort of shift of a little bit less of people coming in on the lower end of our market and more people coming in on the higher end of our market. Okay. Now keep in mind, and Megan can go through these numbers with you. Remember, Washington Now, this whole project started about bringing young people to our town, getting more young people into our school district. Those numbers played out in the school district. They saw significant increases in the number of students coming into our school district. Where the myth, I think, was back in the day, I would sit in meetings and people would say, oh, it's affordable. They need affordable. And what we're seeing is that's not really true. What we're seeing is a lot of the people that came into this market that put their students into Region 12 in our public schools, they're fairly affluent. Okay, they weren't looking for the $250,000 houses. They're actually more affluent. They're looking for the higher priced houses. Okay, so they're willing to stretch quite a bit, and they are. And what we have right now, which is interesting, is we have a fair amount of families out there still trying to get in, and they've got budgets up to $1.5 million. Okay, so it's not the low end of the market. We have families that are trying to get in here by reputation of what's happened with our school district, and also because they have friends that are already in our school district and they want to come in. Okay, on the next slide, I know there was questions back when we started this project about financing. There was a perception that what was holding people back from Washington were things like school loans. And what I kind of said back then was that's a national issue. It's not specific to Washington. But again, what's interesting is if you look at what's happened to this market, and we broke it out, this is data that's reported when a real estate agent closes a property in the MLS, they're asked what kind of financing was used. Okay, now a portion of them don't answer it. But for those that answer it, you can see it's, about 30% came in with cash, 30% conventional loan, 30% not reported. Okay. So the other thing that I find interesting is look at some of the lower price points. Those aren't all financed. There's a lot of cash in there, people coming in and buying properties with cash.
That is interesting.
Okay,
Hmm.
so again, it's a little bit of this for me is just making sure we're not falling into myths, that we're really looking at facts and really understanding what's happening in our market. Okay,
Can you remind me FHA versus CHAPA?
great, yeah, so that was something that came up early on because, you know, when you talk about affordable, however you define it, typically in most towns, the lower end of their inventory, anything that's under 350 in Litchfield County can qualify for an FHA or VA loan, which is a very low down payment loan. It can actually be 0% down or 3% down. Okay. We have a very low usage of FHA VA. Part of that is because we don't have a lot of inventory in those price points. Okay. But one of the things we did talk about is if you have a property for sale in that sort of 350 or below range, it is likely you could have somebody come in with an FHA loan. And one of the challenges is FHA has a much stricter appraisal process that includes inspections. And if the inspector finds something wrong with the house, they're going to ask that the seller fix it. And just as an example, we had a deal fall through here in Washington due to an FHA loan because there were some items that had to be addressed and the seller didn't have the money to address it. So the deal fell apart. Okay. That was one of the things we talked about was making funding available for owners of that type of home where we could actually perhaps either loan them the money or give them the money to make those repairs so that we can help that deal go through and potentially a family to come in that situation. Okay, but again, it's not a lot. We're not talking 10s and 20s here. We're talking, you know, onesie twosies, but it does matter. Okay, it can, that type of issue can prevent us from bringing a young family in if we run into that kind of issue on an FHA VA loan.
I just want to put a little footnote there that the Housing Commission was really interested in working with you or following up on that concept.
Okay,
because-
I would love to follow, and again, it's top of mind right now because we just had a deal fall apart because of that.
Mm.
But it's again, you kind of have to look at everything, but you do have to know that in Litchfield County, if it's priced under 350, there's a fairly good chance that they're coming in with an FHA loan. And you have to be prepared either for the seller to address it out of pocket or to help the seller address it.
Yeah.
Okay. Just go to the next slide. Okay, and again, this is just a summary so you can see it more vividly, just consolidated percentages, not by price point. But again, you can see as we came into the pandemic, you can start to see an increase in the use of cash. Okay,
Wow.
so you can, you know, just, and this is something again that we can keep an eye on. But again, I don't think it's the loan. The loans aren't really the barrier. It's lack of inventory that's right now the barrier. Okay. When a real estate agent closes out on the MLS, they are asked, where did your homeowners come from? Okay. This breaks it out by state. We had kind of a mix of states. The gold arrows point to Connecticut and New York. So the majority of people that came into Washington in, you know, during these 4 years actually came from the state of Connecticut. Okay, so for those of you that were familiar with the original presentation, we talked about segments. One of the segments we talked about were people that were moving up or over. Okay, people that may have bought a starter home in another town like a Torrington or a Watertown or a New Milford, where they have more inventory at different price points. And what they've decided to do is move over or move up to Washington. We do see that, we believe, coming because of Region 12. So we have people that are interested in getting into Region 12 and they want to get here from another town. So it's not necessarily their starter home. Very often times they're selling their starter home to come here. By the way, we did see signs of this in the pandemic. We saw people coming in from other communities. For example, there was a family in Brookfield that sold their house in Brookfield and bought a house here in Washington because they wanted their daughter to go to Region 12. The daughter is actually involved in Ag Sci, but they didn't just want to have her come in. They wanted her to be part of the school and the community. So they sold their home in Brookfield and moved here. Okay. And again, the other gold arrow is New York. Okay. And New York doesn't just mean New York City, it could be Westchester. We did see quite a few families come up from New York City, but also Westchester. That, by the way, can very to oftentimes be a function of our taxes. Our taxes are so low. Okay, we have one of the lowest mill rates in the state, but if you compare even most of Litchfield County to New York State, we're half to 1/3 of what the taxes are over there. Okay, so for families that came here, keep in mind, their work pattern has changed. A lot of the parents don't have to go into the city 5 days a week. They can telecommute. What some of the young families that came here, what they ended up doing was they did move here during COVID. And what they're doing is downsizing their apartment in New York City. They're just basically creating a pied-à-terre so that one of the parents can sleep there during the week, but the family is actually based up here. Okay, and some of them stayed. We didn't lose all of those people that came in. A fair amount of them did stay here. Okay.
That's good news.
And again, this just breaks it down for you on a percentage, just another version of that, so you can see where they're coming from. Again, it breaks it down this time by price point. So you can get a feel for, by price point that they closed at, where did they come from? Okay, I think that's it. Do I have one more?
It says.
Okay, and that's just my contact
you.
information. If anybody has any questions, or if you want to look at something more detailed, you're free to just email me. If you would just give me a little bit of time to get it for you. But I'm happy to look at any of this data with you, so you can get, more feel or more in depth. But the real headline is the lack of inventory is what's going to slow us down. It's not because of demand. We have buyers that are trying to get in. We just don't have properties to sell them. Okay. Any questions?
Thank you. I have a question, but I'm gonna let everyone else go first. Does anyone else have questions for Julie?
Julie, do you think that that's going to change in anytime soon, or are we in that sort of rut of it, the inventory problem?
So right now we're in the rut of inventory, and what we explain to our buyers are, if you want to get in Litchfield County per se as a whole, we are generally what we refer to as conservation communities. We're not in communities where zoning laws are going to change overnight and a big developer can come in and build neighborhoods. The inventory we have is the inventory we have. I think our biggest risk as a town and as a county is that eventually people get fed up and go to other outlying areas. Okay, right now, the other areas are low on inventory also. All right, but if you had, for say, an example like a town like Southbury, where you had a lot of people start, putting their houses on the market in Southbury, I think you will see a migration of buyers trying to get in here. They will probably go where the inventory is.
Makes sense. Yeah.
How are the sales with condos in town? I know we don't have many, but are those going to local people who are downsizing?
So it's a great question. I'm gonna answer that more universally. So you're right. We don't have a lot of condos here in Washington. Towns like Sharon don't have a lot of condos. Litchfield really has the depth of the condos. What we're actually seeing is they are going to people that are downsizing. But what's fascinating is what's happened to the prices. And what it is it's the effect of scarcity. So you used to in Litchfield County be able to buy a 2, possibly 3-bedroom condo around $300,000-400,000. What's now happening is they're going for $600,000, $700,000, $750,000.
Whoa.
Okay, especially if,
Yeah.
but this is what's fascinating, right? Especially if there's a first floor master in that condo. Okay,
Mm.
so even when we work on kind of pricing, right? We go to put a condo on the market. You can't find comps to support those kind of, well, now we can, but a month ago we couldn't find comps to support that. But what we had to say was you have to look at the scarcity, right? There are people with larger properties that want to get out of that larger property. Money is not the object. Lifestyle is the object. They want to get into a low maintenance situation, first floor master, less square footage, and they're willing to pay for it. So if you watch the condo market, it's pretty crazy what you're going to see. And you'll see even over here in Beebrook, I think we've had at least one $600,000 sale, and I think there's another coming. Okay, Litchfield, Hunter's Chase, obviously the units that are for sale are in that very high, kind of to the mid 6s. And it's pulling all of the condos up. Okay, so again, it's a great question.
Well, is that deterring people from leaving their houses then?
Well, I think it's two things, Kristen. It's the lack of Washington in particular, right? Where are they going to go? We don't have a lot of condos for them to move to. And then, of course, these prices are starting to go up. Okay, but it goes back to what we said in the original presentation, which is you can't free up inventory if you don't have places for people to go. And it's, you know, it's a good news, bad
That's a
news for
catch
us,
22, yeah.
right? They don't want to go
Mhm.
out of Washington,
Yeah.
right? They don't want to go to Heritage Village. They want to stay in this area, but we don't have a place for people to go.
Do you think, you had mentioned something interesting about pricing. Is there a strategy that's being used for pricing where a homeowner who's gonna sell their house is going to come in lower? And so that creates a bidding up situation?
Yeah, so
Is that
it's what
occur?
we're talking to our clients about. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's the seller's decision on what they do, but we talk to them about the strategy, and the strategy really is if you can price at market value or slightly below,
Mhm.
you open up the pond of people that are going to look at your property.
And then it's gonna,
And what's going to
Yeah.
happen is that's where we're seeing the greatest increases in the value, because you're essentially creating that feeding frenzy.
Mhm.
The thing that's really important to know is that the buyers that are here, most of them have been here for a while. Okay, they didn't just come into the market today. They've been watching our market for a while, and they
Mhm.
have a fairly good sense of value. Okay, so they can look at a property and say it's overpriced, and they won't pursue it. But if they find one that looks like it's priced properly, it's not uncommon to see them bid $100,000 over, 20% over. So the rationale there's a little flawed,
yeah,
but it's demand. And one of the strategies that we've had to talk to buyers about to help them understand the market is if a property comes on the market and there's lots of showings all weekend, right? So you go to look at it and you see people in front of you and you see people behind you, and there's a multiple bid situation. Just know that if they get a dozen bids on that, only one person wins.
Mhm.
The other 11 buyers, they're coming with you to the next property. Okay, they're not going to go away. They're just going to kind of keep following you, and you're going to continue to be in the same competitive set. So again, what is happening to a lot of towns, and a great example of that is watch what's happening up in Canaan. Okay, Canaan used to be kind of a sleepy real estate town. All right. Now, for somebody who is savvy, you could get a pretty good property in Canaan for $300,000, $400,000. Okay, it's not the first town on people's list. But now they've kind of figured out, guess what? Guess where the inventory is? It's in Canaan.
Mhm.
Okay, and there's good inventory in Canaan. And so now all of a sudden you're seeing more activity in Canaan because that's where the properties are. Okay, so to your question, I don't think it's going to slow down, but I do think we're going to see it disperse if we don't have inventory.
Inventory, yep,
Yeah.
it's the key problem.
Yeah.
Mm.
All right, are there other questions? I have one that maybe you can speak to a little bit. I feel like here in the EDC at least, and on the word on the street, is the conversation for us has shifted to the lack of workers and the essential workers, and the fact that, well, there's a labor shortage everywhere, but what's happening is people who are working at the market, the supply, Marty's, whatever, they live in they can't afford to live here, and they don't need to drive here anymore because they can find jobs where they are. So how do you see that playing out? We were really focused on families and trying to get them here, and we found out that they will come and pay prices that some of these essential workers can't. But our rental, like, can you talk about the rental market and just what you're seeing on that lower?
Sure.
Yeah.
That's a great question as well. And I'm just going to give you this example. There are towns like Cornwall. Okay, if you go and talk to the zoning people in Cornwall and you talk to them about things like an accessory apartment, okay, they will tell you that they will work with you to build that, to get approval for that accessory apartment, because they believe that is the only way they are going to get essential workers into their town. Okay, because again,
Mm.
they're not in a situation, and again, obviously, every town is working on their housing and affordable housing. But different towns have different attitudes toward that. And part of what Cornwall will say to you is, let us work with you, because we would love for you to have an accessory apartment. Because we would love for you to make that accessory apartment available to somebody that could work in town.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's something I think is well worth maybe talking to some of the other towns and understanding. And again, I know there's
Well, I
challenges from a
was-
zoning perspective.
Actually, I was gonna say, and we've talked about this at the Housing Commission, Washington is actually you can build an accessory, an attached and a detached by right, as long as it meets certain criteria. But what we have found is that they don't ever show up on the rental market. They get held for guest use, nannies, in-laws. They don't,
But it depends who's putting in that apartment.
right.
It
But
depends
that's
who's
been
putting
the
in that
experience so far, is that
Right.
we haven't seen those show up on our,
But it depends who's putting in that apartment.
yeah.
Okay, so it's
Hmm.
just sort of understanding that, yeah, I mean, you have a choice. So you're either gonna have to build housing in town,
Mhm.
right? Which my understanding is we don't have a lot of space to do that in town. Or you're gonna have to find ways to incentivize homeowners
Yeah.
that aren't giving up their inventory to create rental opportunities.
Incentivize.
So the
How could you
incentivizing thing
incentivize?
is a big promotional thing.
It,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that takes a group to kind of brainstorm and get
Makes it more
together.
competitive.
Part of it is, can you build it? And the other part is, can you, I don't know, are there ways to do something with the inventory that's there?
Mhm.
Right.
Remember things like, when you have a property where you have a mother-in-law, okay, a rentable unit within the structure. Okay, I don't know how easy that is to do that here.
It's allowed by zoning rights.
Okay.
We don't have any rules against detached and attached. Each property is allowed one detached and one attached rentable apartment, or accessory dwelling is what they call it. By right, it's actually allowed. Like, it's the one place in zoning regs where we're sort of ahead. We just, of what is being
So
requested.
I think it's just getting people together to try to solve it.
Mm.
I'll just give you, and I'm not a proponent of this. I'm just saying an example would be by right one. Right? Well, some of us have large properties with a lot of acreage. Is there an idea where they could build a second one? Obviously not creating density of coverage, but for some of your larger, and I'm just throwing this out as an
Mhm.
example of just, are there ways to think differently about how you would address that?
Mm. I mean, this may sound a little crazy, but it'd be great if you could do the reverse of incentivizing people that are here that don't want to move out to move out.
But that's what we were talking about,
Yeah.
is if there were ways for you to
To
incentivize
get
it.
them
A
to,
great example that we talked
Yeah.
about was, we had this $10,000 new home buyer down payment program. Okay, which has not all of them have been used.
Not yet. We have 6 of the 10.
And but that's taken over how many years? Long time to use them,
But we're
okay?
not promoting it.
But a great example of that is, when you have these very low down payment loans, 0.3%, they don't really need the 10,000.
right,
But do you take the 10,000 and say to homeowners that would like to put their house on the market, let's use the 10,000 to get your house ready for the market so you can get the best possible price and free up that inventory. Okay, so I think you have to kind of look at it from multiplying. There's no one solution here, but there's probably solutions.
Yeah, we can probably, facilitate in certain directions, whether it's creating a fund to help, rehab houses that aren't making those FHA inspections, or, I don't know how we could incentivize turning accessory dwellings into rentals, actually putting them on the market, and not on a VRBO for $20,000 a month, because that doesn't help what we're trying to do.
yeah,
But because that's happening.
But there may be, I think there may be other ways to think about it. Is there a way to create a rental within a house? I'll use the example of a raised ranch. Is there any way that a lower level of a raised ranch can become a rentable apartment. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm just saying there may be some creative solutions on how you think about
Well, and
this
That is
to
something
help the situation.
that we're talking about with the new PA 2129. The Zoning Enabling Act is going to force the conversation on multifamily, because I think that would be considered a multifamily once you're inside the dwelling. I don't know what is the difference between multifamily and an attached accessory dwelling, like how you distinguish that. So that's probably a zoning
And
question,
maybe,
but
quite frankly, maybe it's not a housing solution. Maybe it's a transportation solution.
I was just. I
You know,
wrote
maybe
that
it's,
down.
you have
To
to,
get essential workers. get
Yeah,
any
it may be a
workers into town. We
transportation
don't have a bus
solution.
line, we don't have
Right.
anything that comes to town, so that limits your employment pool.
Yeah.
that's a great.
so it
that's
might
a-
not be a housing solution.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's
Facilities
tough, but
around the housing.
I'm
But
sorry?
Yeah, if it's the facilities that are around the housing
Because,
itself.
because on it,
a
because
good
you have to
point.
think about it, unless you build the housing downtown
Yeah.
where the employment is, everybody still needs transportation to get to where you want to. So maybe it's not a housing solution, maybe it is a transportation solution where there's some way to help people get transported into town.
And with gas prices, people don't wanna.
well, that was,
Right.
that was the thing, that to add an anecdote, apparently Blaine lost a potential employee because to come from Torrington with the gas,
Yeah,
it just didn't make sense, especially when you could, there are jobs everywhere, the labor shortage, it's the competition is there so that employees can work closer to home. So if we want to find employees for here, we have to find ways to make that possible. And it's a challenge.
the other thing that crossed my mind is you're talking about people don't want to leave their houses, and there aren't many condos. I don't know what the zoning rules are in town about condos, but some big properties, I'm thinking like Aspect Gardens or whatever, they could put in a bunch of condos there, encourage people to downsize, then that opens up. But I mean, this is just a.
No, it's on our list to talk about. Right now, condos are not allowed, but this zoning enabling act that was passed by the state and all municipalities have to comply with within a year. So zoning's it's on the agenda for this month, actually. Whether it's multifamily, condo, mixed density type housing. I don't know exactly what the limits of I don't know where the law sets the bar. It's a very complicated, confusing law, but zoning will be talking about it. So we want to make sure we're part of that conversation because condos haven't been allowed since the 80s or the 90s. So Quarry Ridge was the last one to be built. And then they
I
just,
don't know what the rules are.
they're just not allowed right now
Mhm.
at all. So there's a compromise.
And again, it's not an issue specific to Washington either,
no.
because even in other markets where people don't want to stay in the town that they are, they just don't know where they want to go yet, and the prices are high. So even trying to go down to Florida, the prices in Florida have increased significantly. And also they want to free up the capital they have in the house to be able to buy the next house. So it's not, certainly not specific to us. It's just, it's more emphasized in our area because if we look at our inventory, a lot of it is held by empty nesters and we're not getting the turn on them. And they tend to be the family houses.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and I would just say it's sort of dicey as a policy of the town. We don't want to lose our residents. We don't want to
No, it's
force
great that
them
they wanna
out.
stay, but
Right?
we
I
have to
love
have
that
a
they
place for
love.
them. We have to have a
Right,
place
so
for
we
people
need to
go.
create some downsizing options. I think that's a better plan than incentivizing people to move out of town. That's not really, we're not in that business. But, and I love that they want to stay here, that put down roots, made connections. We have wonderful nonprofits because of some of their efforts, so we wouldn't want to lose that, but it does create challenges. if you don't. Yeah. I think those were all my questions. Any building, are you seeing new building? I see a lot of renovating, but I haven't seen actual new construction a lot, and I don't know really why.
So what we're seeing is an increase in land sales.
Okay,
Okay, so land sales were fairly sleepy around here for a long time, predominantly for fear of building costs. Also, you've got landowners who are not willing to invest in surveys and perk tests and things like that. It's a little hard to sell land when you can't get them to do that. But what we are seeing is an increase in land purchases that is consistently throughout Litchfield County. But that's where the buyers are sort of heading, is if they can't buy it, they will build it.
okay. So
Okay.
they're buying the land that's been sitting for a
We're seeing
while.
land sales increase throughout the county. I know there was one piece that was put up on, it's actually near us. There was a piece of land that was put up, that went under contract in a week.
Wow.
Are you seeing more, also things like demolition of houses and then rebuild?
You know, it's interesting. I wouldn't say we're seeing it here,
Yeah,
but up in Salisbury, there's a house on the lake. It'll sell for 2 million and they'll just
they'll
level
knock
it.
it down.
Yeah, I don't think we're really seeing that here. And what, I mean, building departments certainly know the answer to that. Part of the conversation we're having to have with buyers is, this is not a market where we have new inventory. We just don't have it. We don't have a lot of new builds here, and we don't have a lot of inventory that's been gut renovated. So part of what we're having to do when we talk to buyers is say, if you want to get into a town like Washington, you're probably going to have to buy something that you're going to renovate. Okay, the good news is you're not paying for somebody else's choices. But then the fear of not being able to get contractors or having to manage contractors kind of kicks in. So there's a little,
The price of building materials is going.
Yeah, well.
yeah,
with
it's starting to come down.
inflation
It's starting to come
Yeah.
down, but again, we have to, the conversation we have to have with our buyers is, if you want to get into a town like Washington, you're going to have to buy something that you're willing to renovate. We just, it's not new builds for you to buy here. And there aren't many people that have renovated and are going to put it right back on the market. And if they do, you're going to pay dearly for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
A great example is this one up here that was just bought. That will
Okay.
be renovated. On Baldwin Hill, the one right
Oh,
here,
okay.
next to the hardware store.
Oh, yeah, that one's actually in a commercial district. I was watching that one. That's virtually a tear down, right? Yeah. All right, well, thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yeah.
That was a
If you have any
fantastic
Thank you,
questions,
yeah.
and again, if anybody
conversation.
needs information, my email is on there. I'm happy to,
And
Thank you.
I'll
No, very
load
good.
it, once Julie shares the presentation, I'll put it on with our other presentations as just an update so people can go back to that. Were there any other questions or comments for Julie? We have a few, we have a couple other reports on the agenda, but that's it. No, thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Yeah, very interesting. info.
Yeah, all right. Fran, you still with us? Yeah, do we have a report from the WBA that you want to share?
No, I mean, you've covered the two topics, the block party and the guides. Those are the two main topics at this time.
Okay.
So what time is the block party usually? you know?
I believe it's
5:30.
30, yeah,
5:30?
5:30 to 8. I think, and then the movie probably starts at dark, do you know? I don't know, at dusk. Oh, I was gonna say something else, but bye, Julie, thank you. Oh, the other thing I would say is that there was a WBA social last week, which was very well attended at Spring Hill Arts Gathering, which was very nice. And it was, you know, I think there was only one social last year due to COVID. So it's kind of nice to get back into the swing of things and to see everybody coming back out. So that was really nice. And I would also say that every business I've spoken with, the labor shortage has been a challenge, and it's making it hard for the WBA. You know, everybody there is a volunteer member that owns a business and is really working hard. So trying to find the time to do extra is a challenge. And so, you know, the fact that the block party is moving forward is I think fantastic. And Lisa has not been able to attend a meeting in a while, and I think it's partially because she is working so much. So those would be the two things I would add there. Jim?
Not much, Michelle, just a reminder to everyone for the budget vote, if we could, you know, it's ironic, but oftentimes it's decided by less than 15 people, and it's a big number. So I would just urge people, if you know anyone or you can make it, to come down at 7:30 and vote. That would be great.
Great, thank you. Oh, I'll also report, Jim and I met with Yield over in New Preston. The sidewalks are slated to start the 23rd. Is that actually next week? I think it might be. I know, woo! So keep your fingers crossed for that. Hopefully all goes well. It is really a challenge over there. We met with the businesses and trying to figure out where the trucks are gonna go and where parking will be to keep those businesses open is not easy. So we're just gonna all pray for some good weather so this goes fast. That's I think about all we can do. What else? I feel like, is there anything else? Yeah, the budget, that's the biggie. Do we have any other reports, questions, concerns? No. All right, well, thank you all very much. Covered a lot of ground today and in record time, 4 o'clock. Very nice. So if I don't have any other comments or questions, I take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, great. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Michelle.
Enjoy
Thank
this
you.
afternoon.